Good afternoon and welcome to the second concurrent session of the day, Liberate to Educate, creating a free-flowing face-to-face learning experience during a pandemic. Our presenter today is Professor David Chaplin from Northwest Nazarene University. Professor David Chaplin is a professor of economics at Northwest Nazarene University with over 25 years of teaching experience. He is the author of many scholarly articles in the realms of sports economics, economics education, and academic administration in higher education. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate it. I will go ahead and share the screen, get the PowerPoint up here momentarily. Thank you for the nice intro there. Hopefully I know what I'm doing here. Let me see what this does. Okay, can you see it coming up there on the screen?
Not yet.
Okay, I did
Do you
it.
see options of which screen to share on your end?
Oh yeah, let me get out of this real quick, or I'll shrink it down. Okay. Okay, let me, okay, I see.
That's always the trickiest part, is
Oh,
getting the right one.
yeah, that was fancy. Okay, let me, hopefully this will work. Let me blow this up now and see if this, can you see it now? Okay.
Yep, I can see it.
Oh,
So
okay.
we see all of your slides, and then, yep, if you go
Yeah,
to
I'll do it
slides.
as the, I'll do it as play from start for now, if that works for you. Okay.
That works great. Thank you.
All right. So hello and welcome everybody. I saw we had quite a few people joining in. So I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. I'll just go through this and we'll save questions for the end. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to indicate. We had to make an adjustment March 13th of 2020 due to the pandemic. We moved completely to remote learning on very short notice. And it was a real challenge, as you can well imagine, for everybody involved. So what I decided at that time, and I've actually stuck with it, even though we're back face to face at Northwest Nazarene University and full time here, and we have been since the fall. And we're teaching with social distancing and the mask and the whole 9 yards there. A couple things I changed. One is I dropped the formal attendance policy, and I try to also incentivize students to attend through use of things like clickers, the personal response system, to get bonus points. I took those out of the equation, partly because you want to go with a no touch type of system and the clickers could be shared by students. And another is we had a lot of students in quarantine, or some that were not in formal quarantine but weren't feeling well and probably should stay home, those kinds of things. I had to be careful as I moved the exams online to make sure that the questions were very difficult to look up online, and really put tight time constraints, because that can really be an issue, even if you use something like Respondus Lockdown Browser to ensure that on a given computer, they're not searching for answers or going through the notes through your course management system. Reduced or eliminated group work, absolutely. We have one class called Senior Seminar, which is our capstone course in business, that we've retained the group work, but again, done it in a socially distanced manner there. And we did away with the local social venture competition we'd have, which would really be a packed in environment and terrible idea in the COVID-19 era. So we've gone away from that, at least for now. Couple of things for the professor to bear in mind. Resist presenteeism. I know that I have reduced the amount of time at the office because of the pandemic. And so don't feel the need just to be there because you feel, it looks good or whatever. But I would encourage you to, at the same time, maybe expand your Google Meet office hours, those kinds of things, or through Skype, whichever video conferencing mechanism that you use. The crackdown on potential cheating, I've found, has really let my creativity flourish. So I've had to get very creative and clever in terms of writing questions to make them less easy to look up online, those kinds of things. And I think that has been a real valuable asset for me, and I'll continue to use that even if we move exams back face to face. Clearly communicate with students that you're a phone call or email away. Mental health issues are really going through the roof here, particularly with young people. So that's something to be aware of, and let them know that you're nearby. And then one thing I've done is even when it's cost me some money, is I'll outsource some of the more mundane tasks. So we don't really have a good network of support, particularly on the teaching assistant side. So I've in some cases had to reach into my own pocket to save my sanity, and so always think of the opportunity cost of your time. And if you can make $50 an hour consulting, but you could pay a teaching assistant 20 to do some of the tasks that you'd rather not do, then that might be a win-win. Okay. Um, for the administrator, I would encourage them to give their faculty flexibility. And what I mean by the M&Ms are those productivity killers of meetings and managers, right? So give them space to flourish, focus on outcomes. As I'll talk about in a moment, I was able to really attain nice outcomes in the midst of the pandemic, and as it's carried on through the fall and now spring semester of 2021. Prioritize support staff for faculty feeling overwhelmed. Absolutely. We've had a lot of faculty complaints that it's really unsustainable because the expectations are, where I'm teaching, you'll teach face to face. You'll also do all these Google Meet office hours. You'll record lectures where necessary on your own, those kinds of things. And it is a lot. So some have complained it has increased their workload 50 to 100%. So pretty scary. And one thing I'm glad to see my university crack down on, actually, starting this spring, is we eliminated the pass-fail option. We made it broad-based in the spring of 2020, which was understandable, continued it on for the fall. But it did seem like there were those students that, for example, if they were a 3.9 GPA student and they got a legitimate B in a course, it would be an easy option just to change that to a pass and not have it bring their GPA down. And we wanted to crack down on that and did so. And I would encourage other colleges and universities to do the same now that people have had enough time to adjust to the pandemic and the remote learning environment. And some of my data helps back this up. So I'm going to go through some of my business and economics courses pre and post pandemic. Again, there's the date you see at the bottom of the screen of when we went to remote learning. Had to adjust on a dime there. Okay, so in my business law class, I was on sabbatical in the fall of 2019, so I went back to fall 18 versus fall of 20. Courses are roughly comparable in size, but the mean GPA went up marginally there. Global business strategies, this was quite interesting. Going spring of 2019 rather, to spring of 20, GPA saw a very nice boost overall from 2.79 to 3.14. And again, we went into remote learning right in the midst of that semester, right at the time of midterm grades. It was a crazy, very chaotic time. And yet the GPA actually went up overall. And then principles of economics. Normally, in my economics courses, the smaller courses on average have had higher mean GPAs, but this flew in the face of that. Spring 20, again, very challenging semester there. But if you flip that around and look at the fact that they had the face-to-face experience for half that semester, so they already had a structure built up. Sorry, I skipped one there. They already had a structure built up. They're at 2.72. Fall of 20, where we were back, but under pretty challenging conditions with the social distancing, the mask, etc. In the fall, we had a fairly high percentage relative to this spring semester of students in quarantine. And so there were some real challenges there, and yet the mean GPA went up as well. And the last thing, I didn't have it here, but just to mention, is our ETS exam, the major field test in business. Our students increased their performance dramatically in the spring of 2020 versus the spring of 2019 rather. And that was with the challenge of having to take the exam remotely with a live webcam proctor, which is, a very disconcerting thing to have to deal with an exam. We had never had to do that before, and yet they were able to flourish in that environment. Okay, so hopefully that gives some ideas there. I think the most exciting part of the presentations to my mind is fielding the questions. So I'll switch it back over for Q&A at this
Of
time.
course. Great.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, there should be a Q&A option on your screen. If you have any questions, I'll give you a few minutes to enter those in there. So it'll take just a minute.
Yeah, no problem. So Kristen, while you're doing that, do we have you know, people from all over the globe tuning in for us?
Yes, from my understanding, so I'm not sure where everybody's from in here. Feel free to
Okay.
add that in the Q&A box as well if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be kind of fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
people
yeah,
sometimes ask me, so it's good to have answers ready.
all over the nation. So I believe over 1,300 people have signed up for this conference all over the nation. So
That's it, yeah.
Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And then we have a question here of Jonesboro, Arkansas.
Okay. Good.
Hi, Lori. Maryland. And we do have a question. What exact creative activities did you use?
What creative activities did I use? That's a good point. I think one of the things I did more of was I worked harder to include more things like this, actually, more podcast, webinars, integrate those into the course. I had some reflexive exercises on the pandemic where people could write about it, how it's affected them for bonus points, and people really wanted to express themselves. So it did push my creativity. Some of the creativity came through in the way I wrote questions because I wanted to make them less searchable online, right? If somebody's taking an exam, of course. And so that's another way the creativity, I think, flourished more within me, but it was reflected in the exams and the student experience as well. And then I think I tried to get more creative in terms of like our social venture program that the capstone students do, the seniors, in terms of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so some of them have done just that. I didn't mandate it, but they've integrated service to those most vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic that are the most cruelly affected by it to help meet them at their point of need. So that's been another area where I've let the creativity flourish. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have another one here. What did you find most effective for you as a professor? Hybrid, remote, face-to-face, or high flex? And thank you
Okay.
for
I
the
agree. Yeah, I know. There's and some of the terminology merges together pretty closely. I think, and again, people have different interpretations of hybrid versus high flex and all, but I think we've branded it as high flex, and I think that's the mindset I've had is high flex. And so what that's meant to me is we've gone face to face. The students have voted with their feet and shown they clearly want to be there face to face. I mean, even when we offer Google Meet advising and stuff, the vast majority of them want to be face to face and make it happen unless they're under quarantine, of course, or something like that. So that's where I've allowed the flexibility on my end to really drive things and just have an open mind about how they can take different paths to the same outcome type of thing. And I think part of what's helped in terms of my students flourishing is to really meet them at their point of need and recognize that they all have different needs. Some are genuinely nervous. So I have a few students that are basically opting out. Now that might be more at the urging of their parents, but they're choosing not to do the face-to-face classes. And we can allow for that through the high flex and be there for them, do the Google Meet, that kind of thing. It is more work, absolutely, for the professor. But I find that they really respond well to that, that you allow them the flexibility to flourish on their own terms.
Certainly. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
All right, no
And
problem.
that question came from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I used to live in northern Iowa, so I know that area well. Yeah,
Yep.
good.
What do you think led to the increase in GPA in the semesters that you all went virtual?
Well, I had a student in their reflexive paper had a great insight on that, and what she said was face to face is great for all the social things that college is known for, and my school takes those very seriously. So that it's a residential campus, small, tight knit, those kinds of things. Um, but she made a good point. Even though she's an extrovert and loves the social side of it, she said from the academic side, you're better off with the remote in the sense of you have no distractions. You're focused. You really can lock in. And so I thought that was a good point. So I think that is what helps explain it. Some were forced, sometimes kicking and screaming into, for example, if you go back to mid-March of 2020, having to move back into their parents' house or whatever from the dorms. And yet they realized, well, what am I going to do? I'm here. We're under lockdown. A lot of the stores and restaurants and all are closed. Can't go out to the movies. I'll study. So, I think some of it is the fact that other options for distraction were limited. Obviously you still have the internet and all that. I get that in video games, but they were quite a bit more limited. And so I think that led to a situation where by default they just figured, well, I'll just put more work in here, nothing else going on. Maybe they were trying to hide out from their little brother or whatever, harassing them and hunkered down in their room to study. So I think that was a good point. And provided this support network is there, the professor's responsive, they provide some exciting materials outside of just the textbook to integrate into the course, then I think they can flourish. So I didn't expect it going in. That's true. So I had to build the story around what I think happened after the fact, because I think it's funny. We expected absolute catastrophe. I mean, I think the university's ethos was the students are going to fall apart, and we have to offer pass fail because a lot of them are going to just not be able to function in this environment. And I think we sold them short. I do. I think broadly speaking, I personally didn't, because I just didn't have any opinion either way. I said, let's just see where the chips fall. I was interested to see what happened, but I didn't try to make any ex ante predictions. I just said, after the fact, this is what I think transpired there. And that one student, I think hit the nail on the head. I think she was speaking for many with that reflection.
That's a really good point. One I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Did students who went totally online do as well as those who came?
Yes, I have a few that are doing it as we speak. And what's kind of funny is when you're face to face, you often get kind of lax as a student, because you're like, well, I'll see the prof in the hallways. I know they're just down the hall from me. I'll call them in their office or whatever. And the ones that are purely online, that don't live in the area as well, so they live at a far distance or whatever, they seem a lot more obsessive about checking in, staying on top of things, self-disciplining, those kinds of things. So in my experience, they've often done better. Yeah. So on average, they've done better, the ones that have gone fully online. And once again, it could partly be that fact that they're home with the parents. The parents are very protective. That's the reason, they're not mixing in the residence halls and all. And what else are they going to do? I think it's partly that type of thing, that's spurring them on. And so, yeah, they haven't suffered on average one iota, the ones that have decided to do it completely remotely in this high flex system.
Have you found ways to keep students motivated through the pandemic and through the virtual shift?
I'd like to think I have. I did wonder about that. It was hard to get a feel for it in spring of 2020 because we didn't have much time to adjust. It was all super quick. You could sense in some of those early Google Meets, mid to late March, that it was dragging on students, and there was concern. And when they left the dorms, by the way, the initial expectation was we've got to do a circuit breaker we'll hopefully come back in a week or two. You can get your stuff out of the dorms, or we'll move back in or something. And none of that happened. And so it was, there were logistical problems and all this too. So I saw people I felt like were getting disheartened. And that pushed me to try to be more creative in terms of the types of assignments I gave them, in terms of just being there as a resource, to talk out issues that they were having. I think the fact I do that capstone class in the spring, and they had a big project, and they competed virtually at Seattle Pacific University. They have a big social venture plan competition every spring, and there's money on the line there as well with no strings attached. So I think money's a great motivator for a lot of these students, of course, and that for that group anyways, that really helped keep them on the beam. For just your traditional like principles of economics student or whatever, it was a bit more of a challenge. I'm glad I offer, papers and those kinds of things, those more creative exercises instead of just straightforward exams, because I do think that gave them that outlet to show their creativity, and to really sink their teeth into something rather than just kind of ticking the box of, okay, I got to prep for an exam and get that result and move on. And I try to give a little incentive for the best of the best in terms of papers, because I've often encouraged students to put forth a paper for a conference, and we've had a very high success rate. We've been able to get grant monies through Omicron Delta Epsilon, the Econ Honor Society, for that as well. So for those really motivated students, that's an extra sweetener there, and I think worked well in this environment. We did have one student present at the Missouri Valley Economic Association that was scheduled for St. Louis, happened virtually in October of 2020. So that, his paper came out of that pandemic era. He turned it in at the end of April of 2020. Good question again.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A box right now, so I will give about 30 more seconds for any last minute questions.
Yeah, I talk kind of fast going through the
That's all right.
PowerPoint.
Somebody
Yeah.
thanked you for the succinct presentation, so
Yeah.
it's great.
Like I said, I like this part a lot, and I think everybody had their own ideas of what the meetings and managers types of things would mean for them, in their experiences, and if they're administrators, maybe they're getting some ideas of how we can really support faculty and recognize that they really are by and large exhausted, overtaxed, wondering how they're going to do all the extra things that are expected in a hybrid / high flex environment.
Certainly. I have another question here. Are you all right sharing your contact information if they'd like to follow up with you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just reach out to you, Kristen, and we can do
Yeah,
it that way. If that works. Yeah, I'd be
certainly.
okay with doing it that
Yes.
way. We use the intermediary, so to speak. But yeah, that's
Yep.
all right.
So if you email, and I'll put it here in the chat room for everybody, if you email marketing@hawkslearning.com, then we can certainly get you in touch with David.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, David. That was wonderful.
Oh
Tons of
yeah.
valuable information. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us today. Going to launch a quick 3-question poll on the presentation. So please just take a minute to send us your feedback. Give me just a second to get that pulled up here.
So I think my last statement here, Kristen, would be just really be encouraged to push your students. Don't expect ex ante that they're not going to perform as well, or that they're going to struggle mightily with the whole high flex type of system or hybrid system, because our students have adjusted pretty well, and they've embraced it. And again, the academic outcomes from a purely objective standpoint have actually improved. So can't ask for much more than that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All
And
right.
I will launch this poll now, so you should see it pop up on your end here shortly. And again, if any questions come up in the meantime, feel free to throw them in the Q&A box. I'll give you just a few minutes to fill that out, and then we will talk about what's coming. All right, so while you guys are finishing completing that poll, I just wanted to mention that the next concurrent session will begin at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can view in the chat room here the access to the conference website, a list of all of the concurrent sessions and their descriptions. And while you're accessing our conference website, don't forget to swing by our exhibit hall to say hi to some of the Hawks team. You can view a quick 5-minute demonstration, and you can also be entered to win our hourly giveaway, which is your choice of a smart pen, a standing desk, or a $100 Amazon gift card. So we look forward to seeing you at the next session.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris. Thanks
you.
everybody for coming by. All right.
Yes, we appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Thanks a bunch. We'll see you.
All right.
All right. Have a great one, everybody. All right, bye.